McGee-Smith of McGee-Smith Analytics. I am an industry analyst, and I've been covering the contact center space since 1990 through several transitions in this market. I'm joined by Jono, who's the VP of Contact Center Product Management at WebEx. Do you want to say hello, Jono?
Hello out there.
Excellent. Over the course of these 3 sessions, we're going to be talking about important topics, right? What are the top things you need to consider when making a move to the cloud? What do you really need to know about AI? I mean, it has become such a topic of conversation, especially since December, right? When OpenAI just exploded in the cultural consciousness and has continued to do that. So, and then should you be making a UC as a service decision first or a CC as a service decision first? Which one comes first? And then how do you think about future-proofing that investment? So today, we'll start by looking at where many contact centers are today and share some insights that Jono and I have collectively picked up working with thousands of companies, just like yours. So you're not alone, right? If you are today a company with contact center agents working on a premises-based contact center solution, you're probably about, with 2/3 of the agents in the world, right? My personal estimate is there's about 15 million agents in the world. About 5 million of them over the last 10 years or so have moved to software-based contact center solutions. But that leaves 10 million agents still working on premises-based solutions. So why is it that now is really the time for a change? And how do we break that inertia, which has kept some companies from making the move, right? So there are a few things. Things that are force a tipping point for a lot of companies is suddenly their vendor that has supported their premises-based solution is no longer viable, or the specific solution that they're working on has been classified as sort of end of life. And we don't have to name names here, but there are a lot of vendors, several vendors, shall we say, in this space. Some of them, with millions of those contact center seats that we spoke about, who no longer seem viable both from a financial point of view or perhaps in terms of their product roadmap. And so that may stop you and say, okay, this is a time for change. Another reason, even if you're, thinking that vendor can continue to be viable, you're finding it too difficult to add functionality, to innovate. The world has changed from that situation where we had products and you say, oh, I want to add this relatively, significant feature. I want to be able to take contact center interactions on WhatsApp. Now, in a cloud-based scenario, that's a pretty easy thing to do, right? You have single omni-channel routing and reporting. But in the premises world, that's a much bigger kind of a thing to do. And so if you're at that point where you're saying it shouldn't be so hard, it shouldn't be so difficult to add something like WhatsApp because my company is in a new market and that's a demand from the customers. So inability to innovate is definitely a reason that companies are saying, okay, it's time. And then having so many different vendors as part of their contact center estate is another reason that companies are saying, okay, I'm done having so many vendors. So lack of flexibility or desire to consolidate from multiple solutions. So people, like everyone watching here, who finds themselves on premises solutions are saying, these are some of the reasons that I'm here today, that I joined this podcast. So I'm going to pass it on to Jono to talk about, what are some of the things that you're hearing from Cisco customers.
Yeah. So thank you, Sheila. One of the things I've often noticed, I say this in jest, but a little bit of seriousness. Sometimes the decision to stay on-prem is a bit of a self-inflicted pain. The reason why I say this, right, and I'll get to the real meat of the conversation I have, but I hear people go, "Well, why did I wait so long?" Once they've begun that journey, it's, "Did I really need to?" Right? "Did I really need to stay there?" I wanna first of all say with respect, there is absolutely some class of requirements that mean that you need to retain that control, but the first thing I often ask or hear is, "Oh, geez, I could have fill in the blank earlier." The reason why I start with that, Sheila, we know that contact centers are super critical lifeblood elements for businesses. And if you have to make that change just in time, that is a heavy lift, right? A heavy lift. And then the problem with that as well is it could introduce other problems and risk or inaccuracies that lead to customer problems. So that's why, that's the first thing I wanted to put out there. And then I ask our viewers to ask themselves that question, right? What really are my drivers in that? A couple of other things we hear from customers, benefits really, if you will, after they've taken the plunge. The first is that velocity. You referred to that, right? Velocity of the uptake of innovation. They could go faster in some cases than they thought they could. You talked about the WhatsApp, the digital omni-channel experience. To plumb something like that themselves on premises, that is infrastructure that they have to plan for, deploy, and manage. Whereas in an as a service world, it's a configuration task, right? So the velocity is kind of number one thing there. And the second is the reduced cost of that velocity, right? Again, the I don't have to do it myself. I am planning and configuring, not deploying and managing. And so there is definitely that benefit as well. And that can't be understated in the economy that we are in today, right? And continually see us as do that. The third, so I have a lot of background and passion around security as well. I love when customers say, it actually got a lot easier for me to keep my employees, my customer data, all of those things safe in the cloud because I'm holding you responsible, Cisco. Right? They choose their vendor based on those check marks. Whereas when they were in an on-premises world, again, they had to deploy, manage, maintain, assume breach, all those things. So those I would say are probably the top three things we hear from customers that have taken that plunge. But having said that, again, this is a very big decision, Sheila, right? For a lot of companies, it is a core part of how they operate. I'd love to know what would you advise businesses and companies that are the top things that they should think about, right? In addition to what we just talked about here.
Yeah. So I sort of want to add on to some of the things that you said about what are companies saying who make the move, right? And the
Right.
number one thing that I hear from contact center managers is, I can make rapid and very responsive changes in the contact center without the involvement of IT. Suddenly, I don't have to go to IT for even the simplest thing like adding a new skill or reskilling an agent. It's like, eye-opening for companies. The ability to get information and analytics in real time that in the past were overnight, weekly reports, so much better analytics in a cloud-based world. And at the end of the day, it's about an opportunity to make choices today in the move to the cloud that weren't even there 10 years ago when the
Mhm.
first companies made those decisions, right? The pandemic really changed everything. It's giving companies who are making that choice to move to the cloud today an opportunity to sort of leapfrog over some of the technologies and some of the changes that have happened in that last 10 years. So to your question of what are the top things that a company needs to think about as they choose that next vendor? Number one is the long-term viability of the vendor. There are some very interesting, intriguing, small niche players popping up in the contact center space. There are some very big companies deciding, wait a minute, this looks like a market I want to get into. And yet, what is their commitment to cloud contact center? What is their ability to fund continuing change? So the long-term viability of a vendor, I think, is so important. As you had said earlier, Jono, contact center is the lifeblood of so many businesses. It's where the revenue comes in. It's where you make or break your relationship with a customer, right? Um, you want to be sure that the company that you choose is going to continue to innovate. And you want to look at that last 12 or 24 months and say, as the market has moved so quickly, Has this business continued to do that? Are they applying the latest artificial intelligence? And, we'll talk a little bit about generative AI techniques. If they're not making those changes and moves, is that really a vendor you want to play with? And then finally, that new solution should work seamlessly with applications that are important to your business. In the contact center, especially something like workforce engagement management, CRM solution, you want to make sure that whoever you work with is somebody who is not trying to pitch their own application in those areas, right? But is willing to let you transition over time, and use the existing solution that you have. Because a lot of companies, their business processes are wrapped around things like workforce management or CRM. So, what do you think WebEx provides in terms of those customer needs, those things that customers need to consider as they make choices? This is your product, Jono.
I know. Here we go. I'll kind of follow the same several things you called out, Sheila. Right, the viability of that business. Cisco is a stable business entity, and again, something that's so critical to your business. How you interact with your customer. You said this, right? How do you drive revenue? How do you retain your customers? Retain customers, the ones that spend the most money with you, right? And so it's so important that you have that. You want to bet on, and I don't use this word lightly. You want to bet on a partner like us, who will and can weather the storm or storms that will come over time. And I can't underscore that enough, right? But that has to be paired, like you said, with investment in this platform, in this space, and it is. We do, right? Contact center is a very important part of our overall WebEx strategy. And in fact, you mentioned, UCaaS and CCaaS before. We believe in that, and I know we'll talk about that in a moment too. But these are things that are in the future for us as WebEx and Cisco, and so that's why we think, we are a great partner for businesses as they're figuring out their next step. That investment, though, is critical, as you mentioned, for that continuous innovation, right? It's one thing to say there's a history of delivery. It's another one to have a roadmap that shows that innovation is going to be there for you to pick up, right? For you to, like we said, configure at the department level and others. So that proof is in the pudding, but also you need to make sure they're going to keep driving that experience bar higher and higher and making it easier and easier for you to adopt. Something else that I love putting out there, WebEx has other capabilities. And there's an ability for us to bring some of that magic from the other parts of our portfolio in, right? You talked about AI. This is a slightly different version, but we have audio intelligence features like background noise reduction and other things that enhance you and I's engagement in a meeting, but can also enhance the agent and customer's experience, right? I often talk about the high stakes, high stress situations. You want to make sure you're hearing your customer well and they're hearing your agents well, right? Those are examples where the cross portfolio benefits are real with WebEx. I'm going to close though with flexibility. I think that was sort of what you're getting at in the third class of the benefits, right? I think you mentioned CRM and employee workplace engagement. I think the reality of the world today is, yes, you said it. We are extensions and we wrap one another. You can't have these siloed things, a contact center separate from those business process. But it's also building those bridges at the right time, right? Meeting you as a business where you are on that journey, adding automation or pieces that tie in so that you're not having to do a huge cutover. That's part of that flexibility as well as we go there, as well as your partners who you work with day in, day out. With Cisco, we have a very rich channel partner ecosystem. So you can keep working. So the change isn't just your business process or your contact center. It can also be true and flexibility for you and your business, how you operate. I would definitely say those, are some of the examples of where I think we do offer a great option and we're a good partnership for many businesses.
So, you know, quickly, the bar has already been set, right, by other competitors. I really think that the contact center moving into digital interactions and automation is really a reflection of the digital transformation that's happening in all industries, right? You look at patient care in healthcare, and that's moving digital. Clearly, retail has become such a full digital business as we see more and more retail stores close. So the contact center, as they move to the cloud in order to enable more agile innovation, is really part of a broader sort of change in industry across all industries, right? Um, and you may be in an organization that has been slower to change. Often that has been financial institutions, it has been healthcare. And so you're looking at your premises based solution where your data is held, and you're saying, well, what can I do to get the innovation that I need, that my customers or patients or citizens are demanding, and still keep that level of security and that level of data privacy that's required? There's really no going back. I mean, customers and patients and citizens are really demanding that we do better. So it's time to sort of figure out how to do it, right? So, Jono, I'm going to ask you to tell us some of the ways that customers, Cisco customers, in the past have made this transition, and sometimes in an organization where it's hard to get innovation going.
Yeah, Sheila, actually, I'm really glad you brought up healthcare because that's a great example of where what you and I might experience and expect in a consumer relationship with a business is now driving expectations in patient care, right? I always make this joke. My mother will do everything she can to go to the doctor's office. I will do everything I can to avoid it. And so the same doctor, the same healthcare system needs to accommodate both, right? This is preference. It is customer, patient, consumer preference. Um, the way that I've gone through this before is we should start with the conversation of the unmet business needs, right? What are the outcomes? What are the ways in which you want to interact with your customer set, patient set, etc.? Where are their gaps? What are the business outcomes, really? For example, going back to patient care, missed appointments. Folks don't know this, but those are one of the most expensive problems for healthcare. And this is actually a really great example for us to walk through here because if that's your problem you're trying to solve, look at the tools you have in hand, right? And so I think the reality for many healthcare systems is they can add this to their portfolio of solutions, back to your point of something on top, right? And it's a great candidate, for example, for digitization, a proactive, just in time check in that says, hey, Sheila, you have an appointment at 10 a.m. today at 7 a.m. in the morning, right? The reminder goes out. Are you able to make that or not? First of all, ensures that Sheila remembers that she has the appointment at 10. But then that digital self service option of no, you want to reschedule allows for Sheila to find the right time that can fit her schedule, 3 p.m. later that day. But the magic is on the back end, now the healthcare system can find other patients and fill that slot, right? So something that was a much more manual process, you can bring into the fold, so to speak, leveraging digital, right? And solving that problem in addition to what you might already be using. I think that's where it is an interesting example for that first unmet need that helps you to get into the digital world, and then you can do more and more and more. But Sheila, when people think about innovation, and we talked a bit about that in our last session and here as well, AI actually is often at the top of that list, right? I'd love to have you share your opinion on what do companies really need to know though about AI in the contact center and really customer engagement space.
So it's interesting when I think about AI and I talk to companies in the customer experience side of the house, right? I say if you were to look at your business, you'll see that AI is already in use. It's not as radical as you may think in terms of it coming into the contact center. I think cybersecurity, one of your hot buttons, Jono, is a great example. Many companies are using AI based tools to help thwart attacks. And I think, when I think about I really think about it as the next revolution of IT, right? I'm old. I've lived through analog to digital to client server, mainframes, right? Now I think what we're seeing is AI as the next revolution in software, right? And so it's not this, outside the box going to take over our lives kind of a thing. It's something that's just going to be incorporated into software. Um, I know AI is a real cornerstone of investment at WebEx. Can you tell us a little bit about how you look at AI for contact centers at WebEx?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll say, Sheila, right, is when you're looking at a vendor, like Cisco or others, you have to make sure that they're building purpose-built AI. To your point earlier, AI and cybersecurity, AI and all of these, you can't just take things from random places, shove them in, and hope that they work. Especially when we talk about contact centers, like going to the healthcare example, or banking, or any of these, there is customer data in play, right? And so, or patient data. So you can't just take random pieces, put it together, and hope that this experience is better. Security, privacy, that responsible AI is so important. That doesn't have to get in the way of innovation, though, Sheila. That's the other thing for folks to recognize, right? Responsible AI doesn't mean slow innovation, it means responsible and purpose built solutions. Now,
You know,
there's
I'm going
three
to add
areas.
something on purpose
Yeah,
built here. Sort of, you know, you use the term, and in my head, what that means is artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. And
that's
the
right.
very big cloud vendors, we'll say Google, Microsoft, um, there's another one, Google, Microsoft, um,
Amazon's got some. Yeah,
Amazon, that's it. Purpose built to me is different from those three cloud vendors, which have sort of general AI, right?
that's
When I
right.
think of purpose built, what Cisco's doing is very specific to the communication space and very specific to the contact center space. So when you say purpose built, to me, it says it's AI that's very specific to the outcomes that the audience is looking for.
That's right. I'll give one very narrow but important example, and I don't know why we keep going back to healthcare, but I'm gonna take it there. Think about just summarization of a conversation, Sheila. If you and I are having this discussion day in, day out, we're talking about the flowers behind you and all this. The stakes are not as high for getting the proper Latin term for that flower genus species, right? Correct. In healthcare, that can make all the
Oh my
difference.
gosh.
Right. And again, it's a very narrow, but I think everyone understands that as an example of where there is a very specific purpose, right? And you have to get it right. The stakes are high in some cases. And so again, just calling that one out because I think it underscores really what you did, like you said, what you meant and what I mean by purpose-built AI.
Right.
That's a good segue because that purpose-built AI is applicable across this contact center right now. With WebEx and our contact centers, there are three areas that we're building AI into our product. The first is in that self-service space. I gave the example earlier of appointment rescheduling, right? But imagine, in order for it to be most natural, there is AI in there. How do we understand what Sheila was saying, right? Or her intent, behind something. That's an example of where, again, the domain matters, right? And so having that
You
purpose-built
know,
AI to facilitate
it-
self-service.
It's funny you say that domain matters. Sometimes when I can't make an appointment, it's because I live in New Hampshire and it snowed 10 inches overnight. And all I
Yep.
should have to say is, it snowed 10 inches last night. I need to
Right.
reschedule.
That's right. That's right. And imagine if the system comes back to you and says, "Great, so half an hour later, is that what you meant, Sheila?" Right? And so there are very just basic but powerful examples of where that matters, and getting it right matters because imagine, right? If that happened to you, you go, "What is going on here? Does this system even understand? Am I speaking the right language?" Right? And so those are the kinds of things where it can impact how a business's customer feels about that interaction. And back to your point, there's many businesses out there that a customer could choose from. Why would they choose yours? Right? That's a big part. The second is agent effectiveness. If Sheila reaches out to a business and I, as the agent, am trying to best make sure, Sheila, you get what you need, how do we enhance, how do we assist the agent with AI? Right? That could be a best understanding of the past. For example, every time Sheila says it snowed, that means that likely she's not going to make her appointment, right? There's these understanding capabilities that are necessary, and AI can really drive a better way to achieve that. So I can facilitate what Sheila needs right now in this moment, right? And the third area is the operational understanding of what's going on. At scale contact centers, they are scary. There's a lot going on. There's a ton of real time information in there. How can we, as a business, best serve all of our customer needs? Something as simple as what are the conversations going on right now? What are the topics? Is there something happening? Right? That type of an understanding, all the way through to virtualize this, right? This is a very common pattern. Those things will make it better, make you operate better. And just, those are just three examples of areas, where we've brought this in. That's all, though, Sheila, fueled by data. right? At the end of the day, AI needs that data to learn from. And so we talked about this earlier, the flexibility to bring in the right data at the right place at the right time, CRM systems, EHRs, whatever that business process is, it's got a source of truth. You have to fold that in. And now you can be talking about that adoption, like we said, right? Reschedule an appointment, then later, add patient notes sent in and all those different parts. It's all part of how we look at bringing AI into the contact center.
Yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about supporting agents. We know that so often there's this sort of fear factor in business journalism, right? AI
Mhm.
is coming for your job. AI is coming for the contact center. And yet, as you and I look at the ways that AI and even specifically generative AI are being applied initially in the contact center, it's about supporting agents. It's about making it so they don't have to sit there and do summarization of calls. It's about bringing information to them just in time to help them through an interaction, right? So it's
That's right.
not about replacing agents, it's about supporting them. And it's very exciting to see agents who are getting this kind of support and seeing what a difference it makes in terms of their frustration level, right? You can send them information on how do we step through all the things that you need to do to complete this customer request. And instead of having to think, okay, what do I do next? Where do I have to go next? Having that brought to you.
So, customers often come to us, WebEx by Cisco, with multiple vendors. This could have happened through mergers and acquisitions. It could be different departments or different geographies making buying decisions separately. And that's just talking about contact centers. Hey, you add in calling, meeting, webinars, the way that people communicate internally in that back office, and the number just grows exponentially. The reality of a lot of business today is, well, how do I do this best, most optimally? And that leads people down this path usually of how do I get to one, right? And so Sheila, something we often hear is, well, do I start by adopting UCAS or CCAS first? You call this the chicken and the egg, and I think that's the perfect analogy for it. Talk to us about how you think about this, right? What would you tell businesses?
So I have been doing this a long time, right? Since 1990. And I think back to that time frame, right? And in the 1990s, 90% of agent licenses were bought at the same time as the PBX. So think of that. 90% of systems were PBX and call center together. As cloud started happening for the contact center, it started happening I believe in the contact center first. I think there's some differing opinions out there, but I'm gonna go with mine. And what happened is very often the PBX stayed as a premises-based solution, and a cloud contact center was brought in. Why? Because the business outcomes really drove from the contact center, and companies couldn't stay constant. They had to change. And so if they looked at the system, they said, okay, I got to change this contact center. Maybe I can wait on changing my premises based PBX. So what we found is in a world that was 90-10, right, where 90% were actually one system, UC plus CC, we saw that drift, right? We saw it drift to companies, maybe 60% of companies having different systems between contact center and UC, right? Meaning, 60% had both together and 40% didn't. And one of the reasons was that UC wasn't moving quite as quickly, right? But now, what is the future of UCAS plus CCAS? And when I look at it, I no longer look at it as two different types of licenses, right? Think about when we used to sell PBXs or buy PBXs, we'd have UC licenses and we'd have CC licenses. But inside the UC licenses, we'd have different types of users with different classes of service, right? So if we translate that into a cloud world, what I see is there are a continuum of users within a business, right? And if I think of the simplest use case is, I always think of this, is the elevator in a retail store, right? That needs very little, very few features. And at the high end is a high-end contact center agent who needs recording and workforce management and analytics and all sorts of everything, right? Everything that the company that that solution offers. But along the way, there are other titles. There's a salesman who could benefit from recording, transcription, summarization. There is a back office, um, billing person who could benefit from being able to review that kind of information, not being necessarily having to produce it, but being able to review it. So I think you don't really think about UCAS or CCAS first. You think about choosing a solution that allows you to select the cloud-based capabilities that individual groups of users need in your business. So
And
that's
Sheila,
where I'm coming from. Yeah.
yeah, I love that you say that because it's true, right? There can be a chain of people in a business that interact with a customer. And the customer's opinion of the business is the sum of all of those interactions, not the person that has the name tag that says customer representative versus, subject matter expert on how to deal with. That's such an important point, I think, that the entirety of the business is going to be judged by your customer on how it went, right? How it felt.
So you're going to pick up now and tell us some of the benefits of a single vendor, because obviously Cisco does have that end-to-end solution.
That's right. Um, we previewed real well. So the reality of I think the situation today is it's not a voice or digital first, right? I think like you said, we have to think of this on a continuum, and with Cisco, we do have you covered. Now, we do believe still, that said, that a single vendor providing all of these capabilities is the best way to do this, right? That a single vendor can be more than the sum of the constituent parts. That's why we offer this well-integrated ecosystem. But there's more than just, how do we bring together these pieces? What I often go to first is ask yourself as a business, right? How do I know things are going well? Right? How do I know that that could be an observability, a network quality, a security, more of an IT view of things, or back to your example of the retailer, right? How do I, as a business or department owner, understand how things were going when there was the person, membership renewals? I was talking to a business and they still get phone calls in that want to do the renewal and they have to transfer them across. So that understanding is at multiple levels of the business, right? And having a single vendor solution that spans that whole interaction from voice to digital, right? From the SMEs that are agents to the person that's, like you said, back office, but the expert, that's such a critical part. And then again, think about if those agents are working from home, Sheila, right? Agents are employees, just like I am, and I get to work from home. This is my home office. How do you ensure that the customer is getting the best of every agent from a quality experience? Right? From the I can hear you, I can see you, all of those. Flip side, having a consistent experience can make your employees' lives better as well, right? Having the right tools that are well integrated. I don't have to go to this system for this thing and then this system for that thing makes my life easier as an employee. So there's advantages there as well. But again, don't let that stop you, right? Don't let that stop you from thinking about moving whichever part may address the bigger need first. Like you said, it's not an either or, right? It is that continuum. What are the outcomes? Who are the folks that you're trying to best serve? That's how you should start this journey. But again, plan for that future, right? Where you can have the end-to-end continuum solved in the way that meets your need. That's really where I would sort of position this conversation. And Sheila, having me said all that, what are some customer benefits that you've seen, or how do you see customers out there? How are they thinking about this?
So I see there are two types of customer who are approaching this kind of decision, right? The UCAS or CCAS decision. One are companies looking for a complete digital transformation, right? Starting with almost a roadmap, spending some time looking at where are we today and what does good look like, right? And often there are several vendors for this, same technology. You talked about this in an earlier podcast, several ACDs, several workforce management vendors. And what we're finding is these companies that are doing complete transformations are saying, I want to find a vendor that has most, not necessarily all, of the capabilities that I need in a single platform. And yet, I may choose to move to that in a phased approach, right? I may first change my workforce management. I may then change my, reduce 5 ACDs to one cloud-based contact center solution. So I find companies saying, okay, we understand that we have a big transformation to make, but let's logically choose a vendor that we can take this journey with. And then I see companies where there hasn't been this impetus yet to completely change the business. And yet there is a need to change customer service, right? Where customer service has declined, competition is doing better and gaining your customers. And so even though the whole business isn't changing, inside customer care, there is a decision that needs to be made. So these CX execs often know what that North Star looks like, right? What do I want my organization to look like? What do I want my access to data and data across the business to look like? But for now, I have to just sort of step through this, do this within my business, and then at some point thinking that the rest of the business will catch up. So, we talked about that thing about the contact center versus the rest of the business. And we talked a little bit in an earlier podcast about AI and how, AI is all about the data. So as companies make these decisions and think about these decisions about, am I going to have multiple solutions for CCaaS and UCaaS? The notion of data is a decision point that should drive toward a single vendor. Why? Where is all your data going to be held that will drive your ability to build AI models? And it's a consideration companies didn't really think about, 3 to 12 months ago. You weren't really thinking about that. But we talk about OpenAI, right? Or Bard from Google, the various options that are out there for generative AI. And we know that they are trained on the internet, and that the best case scenario for use by businesses is to be able to combine your internal data from conversations, from other data, with the generative AI capabilities that were learned on the internet. And if all your data is in one place, you're in a much better position to do that, right? To drive the models that are vertical specific to your size of business, right? So to the extent that we believe that customer data exists across the business, not just in the contact center, having a single platform is really going to drive all enterprise communications to one data source, like a WebEx data lake, right? That can then be combined with more generic generative AI, like OpenAI. So it's interesting to think about the benefits having a new focus just in the last few months when we see how important AI is going to be going forward.
Absolutely, Sheila. And you use the word benefit to describe absolutely having a complete understanding that you can build those models off of. The reality of not having that benefit is a business could look silly. Right? We all expect to not repeat ourselves after saying something, and if I get transferred to another agent, it was an expectation. Please just know what I said before. Know who I am. I always harp on this one, right? You told me to call you. Why are you asking me who I am? In the same way now, these AI models, they need to be complete and understand who Sheila is, because the more ingrained they get in a business process, that lack of knowledge could be scary, or in some cases dangerous, right? And so I think it's such an important point you bring up, Sheila, in there. I really appreciated your time. Thank you for spending it with us. And we hope that businesses have gained some valuable insight across this, right? You and I, Sheila, we've seen so many companies that are in this position trying to make that decision, right? The name of this podcast series was, okay, so what? How do I do this? Seeing the benefits that can come from charting this path, right? Thinking about contact center as well as UCaaS, right? How these coming together can improve the delivery of customer experience. That's so important. I hope what we shared from how do you get started, right? What are the benefits that companies have seen as they've moved to cloud contact centers? We talked about innovation, a lot of conversation on not just AI, but the velocity at which you can adopt these innovations, right? Add them, layer them on. We took a tour through UCAS and CCAS. We talked about the benefits potentially and whether it's a must or as you need it. These are all just some of the important considerations that help hopefully you to move through this thought process, right? Answer those questions that you're asking. Sheila, before we wrap up, though, I want to check in with you. Anything else you want to add there for the listeners?
There's one thing that I always tell companies when I work with them. You're sitting there on a premises-based solution, you're looking to go to the cloud, and they ask, who should I look at in terms of the solutions? I always tell a business to include your existing vendor as part of that story, right? As part of that look at what's out there in the marketplace, because you have a relationship with that business, they know who you are. The transition to the cloud with your existing vendor is going to be the simplest. There's going to be a lot of technical changes. Maybe you don't have to change your vendor relationship. So I always say, make sure you give them an at bat as you make a new technology decision.
Absolutely, Sheila. Thank you so much.